right, so we're looking right here, ladies and gentlemen. You should all have this out in front of you. If you don't have one, you should get one. The classwork for today, where we're going to talk about sine, cosine, and tangent. So this should all be reviewed to you guys, being that you're in Algebra 2, Part 2. But I do want to review it before we get into the law of sines and cosines. Okay, so basically, what you're doing for all of these is you're given an angle on a right triangle, and you want to find out unknown sizes. So you circle, I recommend circling the angle and labeling this the adjacent, opposite, and you always know the hypotenuse is across from the 90 degrees. Okay? So if we want to find adjacent, we're dealing with all of these, we're dealing with SOHCAHTOA, which I highly recommend writing at the top of every paper you're going to do this on. Okay? If I'm looking for x, I'm using adjacent and hypotenuse. Which one of these, S, C, or T, uses A and H in it? The C, right? That's cosine. So we say the cosine of 48 equals the adjacent x over the hypotenuse 5. Then we're simply going to multiply that across, and we get 5 cosine 48 equals x, and that's what we stick in our calculator. Okay? So I pull my calculator up. I hit 5, and then if you hit the trig button, it's right next to number 7. So trig, cosine, 48, and we end up with 3.35. We can round to x equals 3.35. Okay? Now, if we're looking at number 1 here, let's find y this time instead of x. So the first thing we're going to do is circle. I know 4 is my hypotenuse. And see how 25 and y are across from each other? That's my opposite. Now, which trig function uses O and H out of SOHCAHTOA? Should be S, right? And that stands for sine. So sine of 25 equals the opposite y over the hypotenuse, 4. How do I get that 4 off the bottom again? Multiply it. So we get 4 sine 25 equals y. So I put that in my calculator, 4 sine 25, and I'm going to get 1.69. That's my answer, centimeters.
And what is this?
So if you look on your calculator, it's right next to number 7. You hit trig, and a whole list pops up, and you have to pick one. Okay? So let's look at number 2 together. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to circle my angle. What is x to that? Is that the opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? It's opposite. What is 10 to 43? Adjacent. So which of my trig functions uses A and O, or O and A? Sine, cosine, or tangent? Tangent. So remember, you put whatever the trig function is, so in this case it's tangent, then you put the degree, then you'll put an equal sign, and then whatever comes first, in this case, like in TOA, O comes first, so O goes on top, A goes on the bottom. And then I'm just going to multiply both sides by 10, and then I'm going to put in my calculator 10 tan 43 equals x. So x equals 10 tan 43 gives me 9.33 centimeters. How are we feeling? Pretty simple? Okay. Let's turn it over and look at the other side. Okay. Number 3, right here I've got angle 48. Now what is x to angle 48? Is it the opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? Adjacent, good. And what is 7? Hypotenuse. So which trig function, I'm going to write this at the top of my paper again. Some people like to write it this way. S is O over H, cosine is A over H, and tangent is O over A. Just to kind of give you an idea of how to set it up. So are we dealing with sine, cosine, or tangent? We have A and H.
Cosine.
Okay, so we've got the cosine of my angle, 48, equals my adjacent x over my hypotenuse, 7. So I get 7 cosine 48 equals x. So I'm going to put that in my calculator, 7 cosine 48, and I get 4.68 centimeters equals x. All right. So let's look at number 5. I'm going to skip 4. Let's look at number 5. Here's 39. What is y to 39? Y is the opposite. What is 8? The hypotenuse. So which uses opposite and hypotenuse? Same. So the sine of 39 equals the opposite y over the hypotenuse, 8. So I get 8 sine 39 equals y. Hopefully at least all of you are trying to put this into your calculator so you know where to find sine, cosine, and tangent. And I get 5.03 centimeters. Okay, let's do number 7 and then we'll be done. Now number 7 gives you 3 sides, but you only need to use 2. So in this case, I'm going to look at 56, and I'm going to use the adjacent and the hypotenuse. You could have used opposite and hypotenuse. It would have been fine. Okay, so adjacent hypotenuse uses what? Sine, cosine, or tangent? Cosine. So we go cosine of 56 equals the adjacent, which is 4 over x. Now, you have an x on the bottom here. We're dealing with this problem right here. You have the x on the bottom. So if you think about it, we are multiplying both sides by x, and then we're going to have to divide by the cosine of 56. Or you could just think of them trading places. So x can equal 4 divided by cosine 56. So we want to put that in our calculator, 4 divided by cos 56. This is one that messes, most people find this pretty easy. When we get to here where we have the x on the bottom, this is where I get kids messing stuff up. So x equals 7.15 is our answer. And that's my hypotenuse, the centimeters. Okay? So just in case you decide, I don't know, not to do this in here right now, which would be silly because you have these nice calculators, I want to make sure you guys know how to do this on your phone. So I have an iPhone, so yours might look slightly different. But when I turn my iPhone calculator sideways, it comes up and I have sine, cosine, and tangent right there. I'm going to make sure the RAD in the corner is up because then I know it's degrees. And then I simply have to put this like backwards. So if I was doing number 5, I'd put 39 and then I'd push sine. And then I would times it by 8. Okay, so you just use it, you just go backwards. If you have an iPhone, that's how you do it. A couple of the Android phones are a little bit different. They're a little better. You can go the right way. Okay, so sine, cosine, and tangent is right there on my phone calculator. So there's no excuse if you can't use it at home. Also, I highly recommend, especially when we go into law of sines and cosines, this phone gets really annoying because you have to do it so much. If you go to Desmos and look up Desmos graphing calculator, it does it pretty well. Also, if you're going to go to college, they are going to recommend that you buy one of these calculators. Okay, you do not have to buy a TI Inspire like this one. You could buy a TI 81 or a TI 89, but it's a really, really good investment because you will be using it in college. Okay, you do not have to do the rest of the classwork, but you do need to do the homework. It is due tomorrow, all 9 problems. It should not take you very long. You've got lots of time left in the class to work on it. Okay.